So I'll be starting directly with the question. So the first question that I have for you is, if you could tell about the birth of your interest for human expansion.
Right. I was, as a young boy, I read a certain amount of stories about space and so on. So I was, ordinarily interested. But the main change for me was when I was a student. Just in the year I was graduating, 1976, I read an article about this project called solar power satellites. This is the idea to build enormous satellites, like 50 square kilometers in orbit, and to send energy down to the ground by microwaves. And the article ended by saying, if this happened, if the space industry could sell energy to the Earth, this would be terrific, because then it would grow and grow and grow, because the energy industry grows and grows. Instead of being just space agencies, which basically don't grow, they just do the stuff year by year, but nothing really changes over the last 20 years or so. And so, in fact, then I was able to do a PhD on solar power satellites, on the economics of that. And as a result of that, I met some people in Japan who were doing that work, and we got on very well, and they invited me over to Japan. So that was how I got serious about it. And the other important thing was I met specifically two aerospace engineers who both, one in England and one in America, and both of them said the same thing to me. They said, the absolutely key thing for space is just the cost of getting to space. If we make that cheap enough, we can do everything. If we don't make it cheap enough, we can't. And to make it cheap, we have to make reusable vehicles. So long as we throw away the rocket every time we go to space, it will never, ever grow cheap. It's impossible. But reusable vehicles are perfectly possible. But for various reasons, space agencies haven't yet started to do that. And Spaceship One, in 2004, showed how very cheap. The whole project cost $20 million to go up to space and down. Now, that's much less important than going to orbit. But $20 million is what NASA spends every morning before lunch. I mean, it's nothing for a space agency. So we know that reusable vehicles can be made at quite reasonable cost. But until we do make them, then we're stuck. And once we do make them, then many, many, many things become possible.
I got it, Sachika. Hi. Hello, sir. I'm Bharti Sharma from Space Renaissance, India. So my question to you is, what is your personal history and academic background?
Thanks. When I went to university, I started by doing sciences, and then I changed in my last year to economics. And this was a rather kind of a mixed, half and half. But it turned out rather well, because when I did, as I just said just now, as I was graduating, I read about the solar power satellite project. And this is a good mix of technology and economics, because energy is very simple. If you can make cheap energy, you can sell it. But if it's not cheap, no one will buy it. And so after graduating finally in economics, I went to a business school. And so I did a master's thesis on the solar power satellite project. And I was quite lucky, because in those days in England, I was able to get a grant to do the master's project and a doctor's project on solar power satellites. In England today, this is impossible. You have to borrow and go into debt to do such a thing. But life depends a certain amount on luck, and I had lucky timing. And so then, as I was doing my PhD on the economics of satellite power stations, I got a part-time job at ESA, the European Space Agency, because the SPS, we call it Solar Power Satellite Project, was being led in America. And so the European Space Agency sort of said, well, if America was to build this, what should we do? And they found two German students and me, and invited us to go, who were working on SPS already, reading all the reports and stuff. And so this was really good fun. As a research student, you're poor, and you're a bit lonely because you work on your own topics. So to have a sort of a position in the space agency and meet the guys there and go to America for conferences and stuff, this was real fun, you know. So I was quite lucky, but you know, they say luck favors the prepared mind. So by reading, and I was reading a lot of different articles about many different things, and that's why I came across the SPS idea. If I hadn't read the article, I would never have known about it, you see. So as advice, you know, to any young sort of energetic, ambitious person studying, read lots of different things, you know, to get ideas from all over. There are so many ideas around, but unless you notice them, unless you recognize them, then you miss them.
What is your vision of space and of humankind?
I tend to follow the idea of evolution, you know. We're so similar to other mammals on the earth, you know, that I think we've evolved on the earth here. And we just grow and grow and grow. And, you know, humans have spread all over the planet, you know. People live on the ice caps and they live in the jungles and in the deserts. And it's obvious that we'll spread out further. And I think we're in a funny position because we could have started to expand out into space 50 years ago. The reusable vehicles were possible already half a century ago. And so we're kind of blocked from spreading as we should. But, you know, so a lot of people, you know, think that we're destroying the environment and we have to stop industry and go back to, you know, living within the limits of the planet. This is complete madness. I mean, it's like a child who thinks the house they live in is the whole world, you know. And if we don't spread out, we'll disappear, I'm quite sure, you know. And I don't have any really sort of philosophical thing particularly, except that, you know, with astronomy, you know, with telescopes now and the understanding of the galaxies, there's 1 trillion stars in our galaxies and 1 trillion in our galaxy and 1 trillion galaxies. There's obviously a lot of fun to be had as we spread out. And, you know, the idea that 7 billion people is too many is laughable. I mean, there's going to be trillions of humans spreading out through the galaxy, I would have thought. And it's just a question of getting started with reusable vehicles. And as you may know, my particular topic is tourism, because I think that's the easiest way to get a lot of money, you know, as commercial service to pay for reusable vehicles, just like tourism pays for airlines, you know.
Thank you so much, sir. My next question is, do you think humanity is doing everything that has to be done and that we are in time on our evolutionary road to space?
Well, no, I don't. And if you've read some of my articles, a date I often mention is the 3rd of October, 1942, because this was the first day when a rocket reached space. The German engineers, you know, who were developing rockets during the war, so the project was a missile project. But as you probably know, the people doing it were the people who had, long before the war, had started what was called the German Space Travel Association. You know, they were all very keen on space travel. And that evening, they had, you know, there were several thousand engineers on the campus. They all had parties, and at the top party, they you know, had various speeches, you know, but they drank a toast to space travel. They said, you know, once the war is over, let's do space travel. And the vehicle that had flown that day was the A4 rocket, which later became a missile with a bomb. But they made the A4B, which had wings, and they even designed the piloted version, you know, which would have been a suborbital space plane. Okay, and unfortunately, they weren't able to fly that during the war, but that's what they were going to do once the war was over. But as you know, they were captured, and half went to the Soviet Union, half went to America, and were told, build missiles, build missiles. And they spent the next 50 years building missiles, you know. So right from the start of space, the first rocket that could get to space, the engineers planning it, or the engineers who made it, succeeded. Their dream was space travel, you know, and it was to be a reusable vehicle. So no, we're not doing everything. You know, we've really, it's strange, you know, Europe and America have wasted 50 years as far as I'm concerned. And hopefully, you know, competition now from India, from China, from other, even Iran and Brazil, you know, who are building rockets to launch satellites, you know. It's not so difficult to start with a suborbital vehicle. I mean, India already makes fighter jets, you know, that's plenty. That technology is quite adequate. with the launch vehicles, to build suborbital spaceplane. It's only got to carry 2 people to start, and so no, I don't think we are doing everything, but things are moving. There are 1 or 2 companies in America beginning to make efforts, but it's strange to me that America, with its vast amount of money, hasn't done this. You'd think, America would do tourism in space, but not yet. Well, here in Japan, I was invited to be the chairman of the SSTJ, the Society for Space Tourism of Japan, which is still tiny, but we have some very interesting people, including a guy from a major advertising company who's doing quite a lot of work, making a sort of a network of organizations around the country interested in space as a sort of tourism activity. And we do events for children. And one of the things that children find entertaining, I mean, I think, young people find the idea of traveling to space very interesting. I don't know if it's genetic or spontaneous or something, but the good news is that firstly, suborbital flights will become very cheap. And you may know Burt Rutan, who designed Spaceship One and Spaceship Two. He said, well, even a suborbital flight will get to $400, he said. Because once you, like airplanes, airplanes still getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper with low-cost airlines and so on. So suborbital flights will get to a price which all of the middle class will be able to fly on for sure. But apart from that, to sort of encourage young people, we talk about sports in space, sports in zero gravity, and sports on the moon, because 1/6 gravity is also very interesting. And sports is a huge industry, and it's very it's popular, but it's also a big business, Olympics and World Cup and so on. And so sports in zero gravity in orbiting sports centers and then on the moon will be immensely popular, but without any question. And we have to see how long it takes to develop the moon. But making buildings on the moon is not going to be very difficult. I mean, it's not like trying to do nuclear fusion or something. There's no fundamental science missing. It's just a question of first getting reusable vehicles to make it cheap enough to go to the moon and back, and then making some factories to extract aluminium, glass, and concrete. Make aluminium, glass, and concrete, and build some buildings. So, as you probably know, NASA says they're going to send somebody back to the moon in 2024. Well, if they do, that would be great. And I'm sure Russia, China, and probably India will be, not going to be left behind. And so a little bit of competition. Development on the moon could go quite fast once they make the vehicles reusable. And just to remind you, the moon, because gravity is 1/6 of the Earth, humans are going to be able to fly. This with wings and flippers on our feet, we'll be able to fly. And there's a wonderful short story by Robert Heinlein, called The Menace from Earth. It's a short story called The Menace from Earth. It's on the web, you can find it. It's a teenage love story set on the moon by some teenagers who learn to fly because it's their hobby, flying in this big. They find the big canyon on the moon and fill it with air. And I read that as a student, and that's been one of my sort of dreams, really, to fly on the moon. Because it's true. It will definitely be possible. And so, lunar flying Olympics. I say, when do you think the first lunar flying Olympics will be? Well, our timetable, which we use, is the 20s are going to be the era of suborbital flights. The 30s are going to be the era of orbital flights, and we'll build orbital stadiums, so people can, because of course you can fly in zero gravity, you can do anything in zero gravity. And then the 40s will be the era when travel on the moon takes off. Because if we start studying lunar construction in the 20s, which seems to be going to happen, NASA and Toyota is designing a lunar rover for 2 people to drive around in for 2 or 3 months on the surface. So Toyota is 100 times bigger than the space agency, So if they want to do that, for them it's pocket money, So I do think that we're going to see lunar things go a bit faster than one might expect, And so I think lunar sports will be in the 2040s will be huge. And so this is, a bit optimistic. We do need peace, I don't think space travel will go very far if there's a war, a major war. But so the opposite way, by doing space tourism, it's obviously global. Many countries can take part. And to make it successful, we need peace. So that I think it'll be a very big force for, getting world leaders to bang their heads together. A war would just ruin everything, So I think that young people, like sports, and so this could be a good topic, to encourage them.
Thank you so much, sir. My last question is, could you please pronounce a short message of yours to invite students to adopt some of our themes for graduate thesis and to join Space Renaissance International?
Well, I suppose I have to then, bang my own drum and say, tourism. Tourism is a huge, we're all suffering because of this, the lockdowns that governments have done all around the world. But I think we're going to get back to normal eventually. And tourism is a massive industry with massive potential for growth. And so tourism, suborbital tourism, and then orbital tourism, and then lunar tourism are just going to grow and grow and grow. Like airlines, we've had people flying in aircraft for over 100 years, and it's still getting cheaper. As you know, the low-cost airlines managed to cut costs even further. So I'm just think it's kind of obvious. Just ordinary business operations will make space tourism cheaper and cheaper and cheaper as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so young people, to get into that industry, it doesn't exist yet. But there are lots of other industries. If you get experience in the airline industry, working in airports, of course, aircraft design, all of the engineering and all the components and aerospace engineering, generally speaking, of course. But then the travel industry and the sports industry and the hotel industry. Hotels, a big hotel today is like a big, it's a bit like a space station, a huge machine. And so getting in experience in any of these, again, event management. There's a big business now holding, concerts and sports events and so on. So working in any of these, and then cruise ships. Again, cruise ships are suffering because of their lockdowns, but cruise ships are a bit like a space hotel, because the staff don't go home in the evening. They stay on board and they do various jobs and things. So working in almost any of these industries, travel and hotel, aircraft, airline, airport, and then sports, there's sports science research, as sports as a business, as sports managing, and then all the media aspects. A big sports event is a huge business event as well. I mean, I don't know, the Olympics is billions and billions, tens of billions. So that working in any of these fields in the next few years, you'd be able to move into the space travel industry as it develops. And so that is, of course, only one route towards it. But any of those fields, I would say, you can have, a good career anyway, but will be a really good stepping stone to move into those aspects of the space tourism industry, which I believe will be the kind of the key economic driver of space development for the next few decades, I guess. Yeah. Well, maybe through the rest of the century, perhaps. I'm still hoping to get to the moon personally. People say, "Oh, well, I'm 68." So, but my mother is 99 and still well. So I say, okay, I've still got 30 years. So long as we can do it in the 2040s, I'm going to be still raring to go. But of course, I depend on great young people, driving it on, and just having the vision. This is absolutely possible and feasible. That's the most important thing to understand. Both technically and economically, it's certainly going to be possible. It just requires people to push and push. And specifically, this reusable vehicles, this is the absolute necessary technology.
Well, thank you so much, sir. It was really nice talking to you. Over to you, Adriano. I said over to you, Adriano. It was over.
Okay.
Ah,
Thank you very much, Patrick. It was great as
well,
always.
well, thank you for arranging it. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Okay, so see you next time, and ad astra.
Yes, right. We must Skype again sometime. Just
Okay. Bye bye. Thank you very much.
Okay then, Sachika and Bharti. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you.